Wendy's with us in studio this afternoon, and as I've mentioned, we're going to be discussing a case which has really gone viral on social media about a pregnant woman accused of shoplifting. And I know the story has really tugged at a lot of people's heartstrings, but we want to use it to raise some very important points around how stores may and should respond to such incidents. It offers us a bit of a chance to reflect on the bigger picture of just how big a problem shoplifting is in South Africa and how security guards are mandated to deal with suspected shoplifting and what you should realistically expect if you are caught up in such an incident. So if you've been there, if you've had the experience of genuinely forgetting to pay for something, not noticing that you'd stuck it in the bottom of the pram or in the side of the trolley, and you want to tell us how it was handled by the store, you're very welcome to share that story with us. Send us a voice note or a text WhatsApp. Before we get to that though, firstly, welcome Wendy. Always great to have you with us.
Thanks so much, Pippa.
And secondly, we want to just give you a quick update on the huge cyber-smart internet outage which started early on Monday afternoon and affected so many thousands of people across South Africa. Personally, I know as of this morning, my connectivity was fully restored at home, but I know that some of my neighbors cannot say the same. They were still struggling this morning. One of them saying our business of 100 people cannot open today because our office has no connectivity. The ramifications have been really big, particularly for small businesses and freelancers, Wendy.
Yeah, the work from home brigade, me being one of them, so I'm very grateful that I wasn't affected. And of course, we're going into exam season and test season, so it's been a very anxious time for many thousands of people.
Studying online, schooling online, etc.
Exactly, which is a trend that we moved to 5 years ago and is now very much entrenched. So we know that a number of customers are now back online, but not everyone. The latest update from the company came at 9 o'clock this morning and read the engineering teams have been working tirelessly to implement a resolution that restores services across all affected areas as quickly as possible. The majority of services are now back online and operating as per usual. The remaining links are still in the process of coming back online as the network fully restores.
Okay, and then I'm also seeing on their website something around the cause, because that's one of the big questions, is what actually happened. While the exact cause of the outage is still being investigated, they say, early indications point to a routing issue on some legacy hardware. We are currently working to bypass the affected equipment in order to restore connectivity. So, Wendy, they're starting to communicate well now, but I'm relieved to see that, because at the start of this, and if I may just put on my hat as somebody who did roughly 10 years of PR consulting, this was an exercise in absolutely appalling communication in the first sort of 12 to 24 hours. And you have to have huge sympathy for them, for the magnitude of what has happened, obviously.
Thousands of people trying to get hold of them.
All at the same time. And with their own websites being affected as well, their usual preferred method of communication of a contact me on the website, etc., and email was out the window. But what I found flabbergasting is that they sort of seem to overlook the very obvious quick fix, which is that you've got all of social media at your disposal to post a message saying, we're sorry, we know you're trying to reach us on the site. It is down as well. This is what we know. This is what we don't know. And to communicate, there was an initial message saying, we're investigating the cause. We acknowledge there's a problem. We think it's going to be 4 hours to restitution.
And then it was downhill after that.
And then it
wasn't 4 hours.
And they went dark for 18 hours. No. So the next update was yesterday morning at 9 o'clock. And what they missed there was that everybody who was going to their website, trying to phone them, maybe getting an auto response on the phone or the email, but the next step you go to is, well, let's check their Twitter account, their Facebook page.
And nothing.
And there was nothing posted there.
No, you don't need a crisis management consultant in 2025 to tell you how that should be handled. Yeah. So many companies, when this happens, they want to say as little as possible so as not to attract attention. Well, you've attracted attention because of the outage. Yeah. And every company has this kind of crisis sooner or later, but so many make the mistake of thinking, well, we haven't got anything positive to come back to our customers with, so we'll just keep quiet. Well, you promised them 4 hours and it didn't happen. They don't know how to plan. It's making them panic. It's making them distrust you.
Yeah.
It's making them feel disrespected. And you don't really want that, your customers feeling like that about you. So it's just that whole thing about, it's still bad news, so we won't go back to them. What you're doing when you compound bad service with no communication is that you make things 10 times worse. people have got a great capacity, most reasonable people, to forgive and understand and have empathy if you come back and respect them with updates, even if they are, look, we're so sorry, we thought it would be a 4-hour fix and it's turned out to be a lot more than that. We still don't know, we're still whatever, but we're on it and we promise we're trying to restore your service as soon as possible. Then you can go, oh, well, okay, these, still don't like it, but you're not now feeling resentful and distrustful and disrespected.
Especially for, personally, it's we have had such excellent, reliable, communicative service from them up until now. It was an anomaly. It was very out of character in my experience as a customer to be left without connectivity for as long as we've been. So as you say, I was predisposed to be understanding, forgiving.
Yes, until they went dark.
And I'm like, come on, guys. Just one post on Facebook.
Social media.
Anyway,
yes.
They obviously got the message, because in the last 24 hours, there has been a substantial turnaround in how they are communicating and the updates they're giving. I'm aware of the fact that not all customers have been fully restored as yet. So just that is the update from them, that it is an ongoing process of physically switching everybody off whatever the legacy hardware is that was causing the issue onto new circuits. And that's probably a technically very horrible explanation, but that's where we're at. So they can't really give an estimated time for full restoration, but that's what we do know. And for now, to be continued, I'm sure when we get more information on what actually went wrong, certainly it'll be something to revisit. But thanks for that feedback, Wendy. Okay, and so on to our main focus today, which is around the issue of shoplifting and how it is dealt with by stores. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners will have seen the story that has prompted this conversation, because it really was spreading far and wide over the Mother's Day weekend, and a lot of people were framing it in the context of what a terrible way to treat a mother, an expectant mother, the day or two before Mother's Day. We received an email from a very outraged friend of the person who has been accused in this case. It's been circulated rapidly. And what we're going to do is I'm going to share with you what was presented to us. And then obviously we have had a conversation with Pick n Pay for their response. Wendy will tell you what they had to say. But I also wanted to spread this wider into a broader conversation around the problem of shoplifting and how stores are, how it has been suggested stores should react in cases like this, whether accidental or intentional. I'm not going to draw any inferences about whether or not this was accidental or intentional. We're going to share with you what the person has said, what the store has said in response, and then we'll go broader. So this is what was presented to us initially by email. The friend said to us, this is a Cape Town woman, a young mother with a 4th child on the way, who had gone shopping with 2 of her children at her local Pick n Pay in Constantia. The story was that the children were being somewhat fractious, so she was very distracted. She was trying to calm them down, still manage her shopping, and she grabbed several colouring books off the shelf and put them in the trolley. And the friend says, fully intending to pay for them, but she put her handbag on top of them so that the warring toddlers would not grab at them and start fighting over them. And you can guess how the story went from there. They were not declared at the till, they were not paid for, and when she attempted to leave the store, she was handed over to police. Now, Wendy, the version that is circulating on social media had her spending the weekend in a jail cell. Emphatically, we know that that is not what happened.
Absolutely not. Okay. No, she was taken into custody. She was released with a court date pending. She has since sought legal representation, because what her friend wanted us to do was give her a voice and share the issue on this platform. So we followed up, and she said no, the friend had since sought legal representation, and the attorney had advised her not to speak to us either on air or off air about the incident. So even so, this case does give us a really good opportunity to reflect on the issue of shoplifting, as you said, whether accidental or not, and to raise awareness of what you should and should do. Most people think that the response of people caught having not paid for something is, well, let me pay for it now. And that is always refused for obvious reasons. You could then give it a go, and if you got caught, say, oh, sorry, let me pay for it now. I mean, we really couldn't have that as the protocol for obvious reasons. So as Laura, the friend who mailed us, said, it was a simple human mistake. One that was met with zero compassion. Pick n Pay refused to listen. She was detained, handed over to police, taken into custody, all in front of her children. As a mother, you can understand your insides contracted the thought of that. She wasn't offered food in that jail cell. She was treated as if she'd committed a serious crime, and now she's facing a court date. My friend's devastated. She feels ashamed and humiliated, too embarrassed to share what happened, even with close friends. Laura pointed to scientific evidence, a 2022 study published in Frontiers in Psychology, which found that parents managing small children experience high cognitive load, which directly impacts memory and task completion. She ended that email to us by saying she wasn't being careless or dishonest. She was doing what mothers do every day, juggling the impossible under pressure. I believe this story deserves a wider conversation, because what happened to her isn't just about one woman. It reflects how easily vulnerable mothers can be criminalized for simply trying to cope.
Now, that was also shared on Facebook, Wendy, and I saw a lot of people responding with a lot of sympathy for the woman, and a few people saying, me too, it happened to me. I've got one coming in from Dean who's saying it happened to a friend of mine as well, also suffering from preggy brain. She ended up in jail with a court case. The moment the items are concealed or covered or hidden, it changes the intent. If the items were laying freely and exposed, you'd have a better leg to stand on, arguing that it was accidental. That is what the arresting officer told my friend.
That's an
at the
important
time.
point.
Yeah. Wendy, obviously very important to hear the store's perspective here, and you've had robust and extended engagement with Pick n Pay in the last couple of days. What was their feedback?
This is what they want to say on the record. Incidents like this are always distressing, and we really feel for our customer. Unfortunately, shoplifting is a very real problem across the retail industry in South Africa. To ensure that everyone is treated fairly, our approach, which is in line with the retail industry, cannot make exceptions or judgment calls for certain types of customers or certain circumstances, however difficult that is. Our policy is one of consistency, fairness, and procedure. This includes customers who are found not to have paid for goods and offer to pay for them when approached. In each case, our security respectfully engages with the customer and the police are called. Once this happens, the decision to proceed lies entirely with the police. Of course, mistakes can happen, but we are obliged in every case to follow industry procedure and ensure all customers are treated equally, no matter how difficult the circumstances. We do ask our customers to be especially careful when leaving the store and make really sure that they have paid for all their goods. Pick n Pay didn't want to make an inflamed situation worse and was very reluctant to say more to protect the customers and the investigation, but they did tell me that there were some inaccuracies reported on social media. For instance, there were more than what actually was 5 unpaid for colouring books, 70 Rand each, that were concealed under the woman's handbag in the trolley.
Okay, so their perspective again is
we're not
she was
go
treated
there.
consistently as
Yes.
everybody else in the same position would have been, pregnant or not, regardless of age,
And even if it
regardless
had
of who
been
you
just
are,
one thing, the same procedure
would have been
applies.
followed.
Applies,
Okay.
right.
And I want to say here, we obviously need to leave it to the courts, Wendy, to make a finding on the merits of this case. One assumes they will look at the till slips, they will look at any camera footage that is available to establish what wasn't wasn't paid for and in what circumstances. So we are not going to comment on the merits of the individual case
Absolutely
here.
not.
But what we want to do is just highlight the bottom line, that it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter whether you did genuinely forget. And we can all understand how it happens.
Because the store cannot make a judgment call. That's for the police to proceed, and then the senior public prosecutor in the applicable court can and very often does say, well, we're not going to prosecute this case. Sometimes that only happens after you've been remanded, and then you've still got weeks to wait till your next court appearance, which is very, very stressful. But yeah, it needs to run its course without the involvement of the retailers. What the bottom line is, they don't do anything more than the security guard observe. If found that you haven't paid for everything in your trolley, the police are called, and then it's out of their hands.
Okay, so that is the consistent application that is meant to happen.
I've dealt with many cases.
Okay,
yeah.
And we'll talk after the news a little bit about that's not just an individual store decision. That is advice that has been shared with the industry by industry bodies whose words we will share with you. But Wendy, the simple fact that we're having this conversation and the reason that they have to take that approach is the fact that retail stores lose huge amounts to shoplifting every year, don't they?
They do, absolutely. They refer to it as shrinkage, incidentally. And it is a substantial problem, leading to substantial losses for all retailers. So they do not offer their security guards discretion in their response because they can't afford to be seen to be discriminating in any way, in the context of this country in particular. So they can't let one off and not the other. So the only way to deal with that and never to have the accusation of discrimination pointed at them one way or the other is to say, you see the deed, you spot it, you report it, the police detain the person in the store till the police come, and then it's in their hands. So and as I said, and then it's up to the senior public prosecutor.
Okay. There are, however, guidelines on how that person should be treated in the meantime, and how they are dealt with. And we will go into those in some degree of detail after the Eyewitness News headlines. But just very quickly, Wendy, did you get any indication of the scale of the problem? I don't know if the individual retailers are prepared to share how much they lose to shoplifting every year, or if any industry body does?
No. Well, the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa was the obvious place to go. They cannot quantify the cost of shoplifting because these incidents are not collated on a national level from their members.
Interesting.
It is interesting.
You
think they would. Yes, exactly. But I found a stat, according to the Global Retail Theft Barometer, South Africa is one of the top 5 countries hit by so-called shrinkage.
Gosh.
So that'll give you an idea of the scale in this country. Abraham Nelson, who's the Executive Crime Risk Initiative at the CSA, said, what we can confirm is that shoplifting represents a significant percentage of shrinkage in retail outlets, which inevitably affects their bottom line. It ranges from random acts where you find people feeling hungry and stealing something, or just needing a loaf of bread, but then there are organized groups who target specific products, for instance, baby formula and baby diapers. And I have to say there's another category that I've been privy to, is that you see it all the time, especially people who have children. They want to eat something and they want to eat it now. So you let them have the, I don't know, little yogurt or it's probably difficult,
the packet of chips or something
like that.
Whatever
it is, and the child might throw the packet out the trolley, or then that is absolutely, you consumed something, you had the benefit of something you didn't pay for. So that's another thing to watch out for. The CGCSA says they continue to work with retailers and law enforcement stakeholders to mitigate the impact of shoplifting on their businesses.
Our first voice note in from someone who's had the experience of a shoplifting accusation. Let's take a listen.
I was accused once falsely of shoplifting, but I could understand why they thought it. I had to exchange shoes for my 2-year-old at Woolworths Canal Walk. And because I've done it a few times before, I just went and get the new shoes first. I tried it on and I just put it in the packet with the shoes I was going to exchange. And it was all done under camera. So I went upstairs to customer service, did everything. And as I left the store, a security guard came to call me back, and I thought something was wrong with my credit card. But then they took me to this room in the back and keep on very aggressively saying to me, and we know what you did, just admit you stole shoes. And I said, no, yes, the slip I exchanged. And they wouldn't listen to me, and they were carrying on. So eventually I phoned my husband to say, I think you must come fetch our child because it looks like I'm going to jail or something. And he was furious and just said, get the freaking manager there. And when the manager came and they looked at everything, they said, no, I can go. But it was not a great experience. And my son was with us the whole time. And he was surprisingly calm and asked me, why did I get so upset? My 2-year-old.
Interesting that, yeah. I'm sorry that you went through that, Liz, and thank heavens it was resolved the right way. I just wanted to say, Wendy, it's something I'm so acutely aware of. If I'm returning an item to a store,
you clear it at the entrance of
I
the
make
store.
a point of stopping at the door to say to
I.
the security guard, I'm returning these, I'm going to customer service, here's the slip.
There was a court case around something very similar. This woman had bought a pair of shoes from another branch, and she was now in this branch and trying on a bigger pair or something to do an exchange. So she walked into the store with the wrong size shoes on her, and she was also, and it went all the way to court, and she was found not guilty. And in such cases, we'll get to it. You might have cause for taking some action of your own.
Well, somebody has actually shared an example of that with us, and we'll get to that in just a second, because obviously there is the possibility for false accusations to happen, and that's part of the conversation, is what are your rights. But Wendy, before we get to that, the Consumer Goods and Services Ombudsman has actually issued an advisory note to retailers on how to handle suspected shoplifters. Now, it's very, very long, running to pages and pages long, but a couple of the salient details we just wanted to pick out and flag for you. Among them, the fact that the advice is, please, if you are approaching a suspected shoplifter, it has to be done with courtesy and with discretion. Several of the clauses in this document say move it off the shop floor as rapidly as possible. Move to a manager's office. You don't want a situation where a security guard is accusing somebody publicly right in the middle of a busy store entrance and saying you are a thief.
There's no justification for that.
Yeah.
And actually, as well, that no physical engagement should happen unless the suspected thief is actively trying to leave without accounting for their actions, in which case they may be restrained with reasonable force. I mean, that makes sense.
Okay, so they shouldn't be touching you. They shouldn't be grabbing you by the arm saying, stop thief, loudly in the middle of the store.
There should be no men also
searching
patting
women.
down or searching women. So, yeah, and then if a security employee or some kind of agent does search the person that's being detained, as I say, must be with a woman for a woman, and they must be informed of their right to remain silent, of the consequences of not remaining silent. We've all seen the movies, hey?
Yeah.
And not to be compelled to make any confession or admission that could be used in evidence against them. If any suspected stolen goods are recovered from the shopper or arrested person, they should be safeguarded and preserved as evidence in accordance with the instructions of the police. Special care should be taken.
This is important.
Yes, when dealing with the elderly, juveniles, and persons possibly suffering from a mental incapacity or health problem such as diabetes.
26 weeks pregnant.
Yeah.
I don't know how visible it depends. I was barely visible at 26 pregnant, so it wouldn't have been obvious. But there is a bit of a red flag there, Wendy, that is potentially somebody who should fall into the category of the exercise extra care.
Absolutely.
Part of the conversation.
Absolutely,
okay.
Yes.
So that is literally what the Consumer Goods Ombudsman has given to stores as a directive on the correct way to engage. Let's talk about the wrongful situation. And we heard an example there from Liz of somebody who had not shoplifted, who was detained for quite some time in store on the belief that she had. CL writing to us to say, I was taken into custody at Constantia Village and charges were pressed, but Pick n Pay were in the wrong and Princeton Security. We sued and the case was settled. But Kathy's comment is, it has taken me years to get my confidence back after that experience.
I can imagine.
You can imagine, obviously, for somebody who has genuinely not done it or who has really genuinely done it unintentionally, the impact of being accused of being a thief is huge. And in a case like this, with it happening in front of children, obviously you understand the emotional trauma that comes with that. But Wendy, I have to say this again, I really feel for the stores as well. We know how much they lose to shoplifting.
And as well as the costs they have to incur for the security to try and combat
it. So you do have to be mindful that they have the right to keep their goods safe and to protect themselves from items leaving the store which has not been paid for. So you have to feel for both parties in a case like this.
I think so. And the thing about when these go into the social media space, you very seldom. They're always one-sided. With like us as media professionals, we have an obligation to seek the response of the other side. Social media, no such thing. So everyone's climbing in without knowing the full facts, and the retailers will very seldom comment on those platforms.
Why do you think that is?
Because they want to respect their customers, so they don't want to wade in and say, actually, you've only got half the story, if that is the case.
Okay.
And plus, they want to leave it to, the police. They also, the case needs to, wherever justice lies on whatever, who was wrong and who wasn't, needs to be determined by a court, or a court official needs to say, we're actually not going to bother to prosecute this. But the retailers don't feel it's their place to wade in and say, what? It's going to make things worse. Do you know what I mean? If they say, well, we're protecting our customer, people are going to go, oh, that's very disingenuous, it's a no-win situation for them.
Yeah. Terry and Fishhook saying, what about if a teller forgets to scan an item, puts it in the packet, and a security guard stops the customer and finds the unpaid for item? Well, there is footage, one hopes, of all tills, Wendy, that would very rapidly be able to confirm that the teller did not swipe the item, then that it's not the customer's fault.
A follow-on issue is in some stores, a Macro being one of them, you pay, and a few steps later you get to the store exit and a security guard, and that is to stop or to counteract collusion between cashiers and their friends, where they do that. They don't ring something up deliberately so that the contact of the friend or whatever gets it free. So that's why they're
checking your SIP so
checking the
carefully. I
slips
think they call it
against what's in your trolley.
sweethearting.
Do
I've heard
they?
it referenced as sweethearting
Okay.
that. Yeah.
So again, they can't discriminate and say, well, you don't look like you've very likely colluded with the cashier, so we'll let you go. They have to do it to everybody.
Well, on this point, so one of our listeners writing in to say time has gone by, but back in 2009, I was harassed as a first-year student by store security in a back office for unpaid gum. I'd bought groceries worth about 500 Rand. The cashier did not swipe the gum. It was an obvious mistake, but I had to be grilled for the cashier's mistake. I was too young to know any better. If it happened to be now, I would be on the warpath. And this person's comment is that a standard response, no matter the circumstances, isn't on. Mitigating a discrimination lawsuit with a blanket approach is reckless.
Read that again.
That basically
last
saying that
line,
their point
mitigating-
of the standard response being the only fair one, that we don't discriminate regardless of the circumstances, they think that that's not the sensible approach.
Okay, well, it's an opinion. I can understand it from the store point of view, but I can also have massive sympathy for in the cases where it was a genuine mistake. I've done it. I was very young. It was the days when we still had cassette tapes. It was the Workshop Shopping Centre in Durban, and I was in a musica, and I was looking for whatever music, and the only thing I bought, didn't buy actually initially, was a head cleaning tape. So it looked like a little cassette, but it didn't play music. It cleaned the heads of your cassette player. And I don't know, we didn't have cell phones in those days to distract us, but I walked out of the store and I got halfway down the passage and I realized I was holding this thing in my hand, and I knew then, I think I might have been a journalism student at the time, I knew then what the implications were, and I turned on my heels and I ran. And I was thinking while I was running, if they stop me, if there's camera footage, they can see that I was running in the direction of the store and not
Running away, yes.
which would count in my favor, that there was no intention to steal. But there have been other cases, and another time, it actually wasn't my fault. Someone forgot to ring up a gift in Woolies, and I went back, and they were flabbergasted that
you'd gone back to pay.
Yes, but in that case, it was in a packet that they anyway. Different story. But yes, it is. I do have sympathy for people, and it could happen. There is a sense of but for the grace of God. I mean, you could easily do it.
Putting my hand up here, any mother who has shopped with young children, pregnant or otherwise, and I've done both, I totally understand the potential for popping and you know what used to happen for me, particularly if you're shopping with a baby in a pram.
Yeah.
You take the item like the thing of baby formula, you put it in the bottom of the pram.
Never do that.
It's so easy to walk out of the store and forget that it was there, genuinely not intending to.
But you know why they do it though? Is because I had 2 children 17 months apart, so there are only so many wheels that you can
manage
push.
in one hand. Yeah.
And so it happened to a friend of mine. She was accused. I don't remember what the item was. Her baby was a year old, and she'd just been widowed at the age of 29. Oof. And she was banned from Woolworths for a particular store branch, her local one, for a year. And she still lives in the same area, and she's still traumatized by it.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to say, we're not making any judgment call on the merits of this particular case that raised the issue.
No, we're not.
There is understanding on both sides that absolutely it is possible to unintentionally shoplift, but we also have to consider that absolutely there are a great number of people who do deliberately shoplift, and it causes huge losses for retailers, and they are within their rights to protect themselves and to have store security trained to act to prevent those losses. Wendy, 2 things for us to talk about in terms of practical advice for our listeners. One is, what if you are the victim of a wrongful arrest? So like that case of Liz, she was able to prove that she had not intentionally shoplifted. She had been bringing items in to return them. What happens if you're the victim of a wrongful arrest?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of factors here. If the police officer or the in-store security guy or woman used force, even though you didn't resist them, then you would be able to sue for damages for assault. They absolutely can't manhandle you unless you are resisting and refusing to cooperate. But in order to succeed in the action, the shopper would have to prove that a charge was laid without reasonable cause.
Okay, so if they had a very good reason to stop you and suspect you of shoplifting and you failed to comply, you're going to have a hard time arguing.
Exactly.
Okay. The other case is the way they deal with you and the sort of the humiliation aspect, which I think was a big part of this particular case we've been talking about, Wendy.
Yes, especially as it happened in front of a young children. That's always going to traumatize a parent. So if you were detained in a manager's office for an unreasonable period, or you suffered exceptional embarrassment or humiliation, being handcuffed or something like that without any reason for it, I mean, that's a trauma that'll last a lifetime. If the detective or another member of staff accused you of shoplifting in front of witnesses and it's later proved that you weren't guilty of the offence, you definitely would have grounds to claim damages for defamation.
Okay. So obviously we want never to be in that position, Wendy. So let's just run through a couple of bits of advice here on how to avoid getting into the position of having accidentally shoplifted. And again, I think we've got to make a clear distinction here. But there are plenty of people who do it deliberately and are going to go in with their strategy. If you don't want to be lumped into the same category and make the mistake of accidentally leaving the store without paying and receive the same treatment, what advice?
So be present. Try not to be distracted by your cell phone or your children. When you've come to the end of your shop, you're proceeding through the till point and then ultimately out of the door. Check your trolley before you exit for large items which could be lying at the bottom of the trolley. Dog food, charcoal, a pocket of tomatoes, or those huge bags of toilet rolls. A few times the teller has not thought to look down there and I've forgotten about it, and then somehow before we get to the paying part, oh yes, there it is. If you're using a pram, as we've said, resist the urge to hang items on it or put anything inside it. Sometimes there are covers which fold back and you could it could be out of sight, out of mind, and the teller's not going to see it. Don't enter stores with too much other shopping. Rather offload regularly to your car, because that could create, suspicion. Where did you buy it? Did you take it from here? Or,
It also creates spaces within the trolley. If you've packed 4 bags from other stores in the back of the trolley and something rolls behind them, for example, without you noticing.
Exactly.
That's a good point.
I also spoke earlier about not eating or drinking products in store. Security guards are on very high alert for this. As some people do it with the intention of not paying. And if you accidentally drop the wrapping or empty bottle or forget to hand it to the cashier, you could very well be stopped as you leave the store and accused of shoplifting. If you are apprehended, insist on dealing with the most senior person in the store at that time, because they're most likely to have the most experience
in dealing with it and
control.
know the proper protocols.
Yeah.
I mean, it strikes me, Wendy, obviously if they've got cameras on the tills, is there an argument to be made for viewing the footage before the police are called?
On who's what? If it's you and you.
Yeah, so say, okay, I really haven't done this. I would like you to view the footage, which will prove my innocence.
It's an interesting question. I certainly think you should say that.
And
if
ask
you know
for
it
to
was
be
an
looked at,
accident,
yeah.
You could maybe nip things in the bud. But saying that on top of what you've been saying the whole show, and that is there will be no discretion. That they see you leave the store without paying for something, and they're going to call the police.
They're not obliged to do that for you, basically.
No.
Okay.
But I mean, I think it's a reasonable request if you're absolutely certain that what they are accusing you of didn't happen. Then it makes sense
That's
to say, let's
different
just
scenario.
while we're waiting for the police, can we not just look at the footage?
Okay, an email in from Ingrid, who would like to know your advice on what should one do if you see somebody else stealing something.
It's an interesting one. I think that's for each of us and our own consciences to deal with. I mean, if you what would you do, Pippa? I mean, if you would see it as in somebody concealing something in their pants or in their pocket or their something.
Yeah. I've never been in the position of having to make that decision. Wendy, my immediate response is that a lot would depend on the circumstances. I think I would feel very differently if I saw an obviously hungry child swiping a bun from the bakery versus seeing somebody stealing expensive perfume or makeup. And I know in fairness, I shouldn't say that.
What the stores say they cannot do
is
but
discriminate.
I think that's the right answer. We would make a value call.
So as a human being, I would say I would like to think that I would discriminate based on the circumstances, but in fairness to the store, that would not be the right thing to do. The right thing to do would be to report it regardless of the circumstances.
And actually, it would probably be better than if. But then again, you don't know for sure somebody's intention until they've passed through the till point.
Yeah. Because
maybe they were just maybe they had a crisis of conscience between then and when they got to the till, and now you've stepped in and changed the
they've
course
got a
of
criminal
how
record here.
Yes. So I mean, it's difficult. You've only committed a crime
when you've left the store without paying for it.
When it can be proven that you've left the store when you haven't paid for it. Yeah.
Difficult one, that. I wonder if anybody's been in that position and you want to tell us what you decided to do. Did you turn a blind eye? Did you report them? What was the response?
Hi, Pippa. Just a little funny on the shoplifting. My eldest son, when he was literally, I would say, just going on one walking, we were at one shop and they were selling biltong, and at that stage the Rugby World Cup and everything else was on, and the Blue Bulls tend to have this little mascot thing called the Blue you-know-what. And I'd noticed it in the store and didn't really realize that my toddler at that stage collected it and took it out. And only when I got to the car did I realize he had this thing in his possession. So I took him all the way back, explained to the shopkeeper, and then taught him a lesson about not taking things without paying. Thought I'd just share that nice little ha-ha moment.
Well, firstly, good parenting of obviously insisting that he go back to store. Thank heavens the store responded positively to that and allowed you to pay for it and didn't then call security, which is, I think, what a lot of people might now worry about, Wendy, based on what we've shared today. But you obviously did the right thing. It was a teaching moment for your child. And I'm sure he would have learnt the lesson.
My mother did it to me when I was 5. I stole a little Woolworths West Street. You had all those little separate buckets of pick and mix.
Yes.
And I still remember that chocolate. It was a little dome thing with a metallic foil thing, and I just took it because it was around the till. My mum was paying for something, and I clutched it in my little 5-year-old hand, and we were walking down West Street, and I must have obviously wanted to now engage with the chocolate, and my mother saw, and she yanked me back to the store, explained to the store that I had stolen it and was very sorry, and could she please pay for it, and I've never forgotten it.
Yeah.
I was literally 5 years old.
Thanks for sharing, everybody. And we'll keep an eye on the outcome of this particular case and update you if there is news to be shared at a later date. But thank you very much for your engagement on the topic. Just to leave you with Wendy's contact details, the best way to lodge a case with Wendy is to go to her website. And this is new for us sharing this, but there's a reason I'm mentioning it. wendyknowler.co.za. It's spelled Knowler. There is now a contact form there which is designed to extract all of the necessary information from you rather than asking you to send multiple emails and attachments, which we know are difficult for Wendy to trace. So that is now your best port of call if you'd like to raise a case with Wendy. It's her website, wendyknowler.co.za. And Wendy, we'll chat again next week, Wednesday.
Will do, Pippa.